You're scrolling through your phone before bed, and a story pops up. A group of people you sort of know, laughing at some restaurant, tagging each other. One of those nights that looks effortless from the outside. You watch it for maybe 4 seconds. Then you lock your phone and just sit there for a second, ceiling fan turning above you, in a quiet that suddenly feels a little louder than usual. Nobody told you it would feel like this. Not sad exactly. Just a small, specific weight, right in the chest. That shows up whenever you're reminded how few people you'd call at 11 p.m. if something went wrong. You start doing the math without meaning to. Who would actually pick up? Who would just say, that sucks, and go back to whatever they were doing? Here's the question worth asking before you spiral into the usual story. Is something wrong with you? Or is something just different about you? I'm Can. And if you've ever caught yourself doing that math, here's the real psychology behind it. And it's rarely the reason you've been telling yourself at 2 a.m. I hear versions of this constantly from people who watch this channel. A coworker they barely spoke to all year, except for a few lines about a broken coffee machine. Almost all of them thought it meant they'd failed at something basic. They hadn't. They just ran on a different setting than the people around them did. 5 traits, coming up, and what each one actually means about you. Trait 1. You notice when words and actions don't line up. Some people can hear, I'm totally fine, in a flat, clipped voice and just take it at face value. You can't. You catch the half-second gap between what someone says and what their tone or face is actually doing. The compliment that lands a beat too fast, the laugh that doesn't quite reach the eyes. This isn't paranoia. It's more like your radar for mismatch is just turned up higher than average. Think about the last time you met someone everyone else in the room warmed up to fast, and something in you just didn't. 6 months later, that same person turns out to have said one thing to your face and another behind it. And you're the only one who wasn't surprised. Sometimes it's smaller than that. Someone in a group chat sends, no worries at all, after you cancel plans, and everyone else reads it as fine. And you're the one sitting there sensing there's an edge under that sentence somebody's going to bring up later. You're usually right. Not because you're suspicious by nature, because you've watched enough of these small mismatches play out to know the pattern by heart. Carrying that awareness around inconsistent people is tiring in a specific way. So you end up keeping your list short or empty. Not because you're cold, because tracking the gap between what someone says and what they mean costs more energy than being alone ever does. Trait 2. Small talk feels like a waste of something you can't get back. How's the weather? Busy week, huh? Crazy traffic today. You can do it. You're polite. But some part of you checks out almost instantly because nothing about the exchange is landing anywhere real. You've sat in break rooms, at family gatherings, at the edges of parties, nodding along to conversations that could be swapped with any other conversation happening in any other room in the building, and felt a specific kind of tired that has nothing to do with your body. What you want is rare, and it's not complicated. You want to ask someone what they're scared of, or what they've changed their mind about recently, or why they do the thing they do, and have them answer instead of deflecting with a joke. You'll take one conversation like that over 100 nights of small talk. You know the exact feeling of asking someone, how are you, really, and watching them blink, like nobody's asked them that in months. And then watching the real answer come out slowly, almost surprised at itself. Those 5 minutes feel like more connection than an entire dinner party of, so what do you do? Which means, statistically, you end up with fewer people in your life. Not because you're hard to get along with, but because it just takes longer to find people who want to go there too. And most conversations never get the chance before the subject changes. If you've ever left a group hangout more drained than when you walked in, even though nothing bad happened, hit like right now, that specific kind of tired is exactly what we're talking about. Trait 3. Socializing costs you more than it seems to cost other people. Some nervous systems process a room harder than others. While one person walks into a party and just absorbs the energy, yours is quietly doing a dozen things at once. Tracking tone, reading faces, noticing who seems left out, catching the joke that landed wrong. None of that is a choice. It's just how your system runs, and it's expensive. That's why after a few hours around people, even people you genuinely like, you can hit a wall that has nothing to do with wanting to leave them. You just need quiet. Not because the night was bad. Sometimes it was one of the better ones. But because your battery empties faster in company than it fills back up. You've probably had the experience of getting home from a good dinner and needing to sit in complete silence for 20 minutes before you can even think straight again. while the friend who invited you is already texting about the next thing. It shows up on group trips especially. Everyone else waking up ready for another full day, and you quietly slipping out early just to walk alone for 20 minutes before the group even stirs. Not because you don't want to be there, but because that 20 minutes is the only thing keeping you able to enjoy the rest of the day. Nobody sees that part. They just see you show up a little later, a little quieter, and assume something's off, when really you just did the maintenance nobody else needed to do. Your recovery time is just longer than most. That's the whole mechanism. It's not that you dislike company. It's that deep contact with a few people is sustainable, and shallow contact with a lot of people simply isn't. Not for you. Trait 4. You stop needing people to confirm you're doing okay. A lot of friendships run on a quiet exchange most people never name out loud. I'll tell you you're right if you tell me I'm fine. Somewhere along the way, you stop needing that trait. You can finish something you're proud of and not immediately need to show anyone. You can go a weekend without a single text and not read it as a sign something's wrong with your life. This one is easy to misread from the outside because people equate needing less from them with not caring about them. You just build a version of okay that doesn't need someone else to confirm it's real. You can have a rough day, the kind that would usually call for a check-in text, and just get through it on your own, trusting yourself to handle it without needing anyone to witness the handling. There's a specific version of this that people never talk about. Finishing something you're proud of late at night, phone right there, and choosing not to post it, not because you don't care, but because the moment already felt complete without an audience. You noticed it. That was enough. A lot of people need the notification, the reply, the little proof that someone else saw it too. There's nothing wrong with that. It's just not the thing that makes it real for you. You stopped needing the proof somewhere along the way, and it's one of the quieter reasons you ended up on your own so often. If that sounds like you, drop threshold in the comments. You'll see why in a second, because it's exactly what trait 5 is about. Trait 5. You learned, the hard way, to test people before you trust them. Almost everyone who ends up with just a few people, or nobody, has one thing in common somewhere in their story. A moment where trust went badly. Maybe someone close to you turned out to be talking about you the second you left the room. Maybe you opened up early to someone who used it against you later. Maybe it started even younger than that, in a house where being honest didn't always feel safe. Whatever it was, your brain filed it away and quietly raised the entry price for everyone who came after. Now you watch before you open up. You notice how someone treats a waiter, whether their stories add up the second time they tell them, whether they show up on the hard days or only the easy ones. You've probably tested someone without even planning to, mentioned something slightly vulnerable in passing, almost as a trial run, then watched closely to see what they did with it. Did they hold it carefully? Or did it turn up in a joke 3 weeks later in front of people who had no business knowing? That single moment tells you more than a year of small talk ever could, and you remember it. People sometimes call this guarded, like it's a flaw to fix. It's not a flaw. It's a threshold, a bar people have to clear before you hand them anything real. And you built it because the alternative already hurt you once. So look at what that adds up to. You clock the small mismatches. You skip the small talk. You need real recovery time, not because you're weak, just because you run on a bigger battery bill. You stopped needing an audience to know something mattered. And you learned, the hard way, exactly what earning your trust is supposed to cost. None of that describes someone broken. It describes someone who wanted a different kind of connection than the one that was easiest to find. Now here's the part worth being honest about, because these 5 traits can go 2 very different directions. There's a version of keeping your people few that comes from clarity. You know exactly what you need in a person, and you'd rather wait for it than fill the space with anyone who's just available. That version is steady. It doesn't ache all the time. You're not against people, you're just specific about which ones. The same way you'd be specific about what you let into your body or your home. And there's a version that comes from fear, where the threshold got so high, or the guard got built so thick, that it's no longer really about quality anymore. It's about never being disappointed again. That version doesn't feel steady. It feels like a low hum of loneliness that never quite goes away, even on good days. Because the bar never actually lowers for anyone, no matter how long they wait, no matter how much they've already proven. Both can look identical from the outside. Same quiet phone, same short guest list, same instinct to say no to another group hangout. The way to tell them apart is simple. When someone genuinely good shows up, patient, consistent, Doesn't perform, doesn't disappear. Does some part of you notice and let the threshold drop a little for them? Or does it stay exactly where it's always been, out of habit, even when the person in front of you has actually earned it? If it's the first one, you're not missing anything. Trust the pace and stop treating a quiet weekend as proof something's wrong with your life. If it's the second one, here's one small, doable thing to try. Not a personality overhaul, just one move. The next time someone shows up consistently for a few weeks in a row without asking anything of you, let them clear the threshold on one real thing. Not your whole story. One honest sentence you'd normally keep to yourself, the kind you'd usually swap out for, "I'm fine, just busy." That's the whole test. You're not lowering your standards for everyone now. You're just checking whether the threshold can actually be cleared or whether it's been set higher than it needs to be out of habit. If any part of this put language to something you felt but never said out loud, that matters more than it might seem. Subscribe if you want more of this, the psychology behind the parts of you that everyone else misreads. That's the whole reason this channel exists. And if your people are few right now, or non-existent, here's the actual truth underneath all 5 of these traits. It was never really about how many people you can be around. It's about how few you're willing to fake it for. That's not something broken in you. That's just a standard, and standards, unlike loneliness, don't stay empty forever. They just take longer to fill with the right person than the wrong 10.